The mortar round hit the field hospital's east wing at 03:42 hours, turning the pre-dawn quiet into screaming chaos. Lieutenant Emma Lawson, 26-year-old Army nurse, was checking an IV drip when the explosion threw her across the ward. Her ears rang. Dust choked the air. Through the smoke, she heard them, wounded soldiers crying out, equipment alarms shrieking, and underneath it all, the distinctive crack of AK-47 rifles getting closer. The Taliban weren't supposed to be this close to forward operating base Phoenix. The perimeter was supposed to be secure. But intelligence had been wrong before, and now Emma was crouched behind an overturned medical cart, her hands shaking, her medical training screaming that she needed to help the wounded while her survival instinct said, "Run." "Medic down! We need help in trauma too!" Emma forced herself to move. She crawled through debris toward the trauma bay, glass cutting through her scrubs, smoke burning her lungs. That's when she saw him. A Navy SEAL combat medic, blood streaming from a head wound, still trying to stabilize a patient even as gunfire echoed through the compound. "You're hit!" she shouted over the chaos. He didn't even look up. "I'm fine. Hold pressure on his femoral while I get a line in." "You're not fine, you're—" The wall exploded inward. Taliban fighters were breaching the hospital. The SEAL combat medic grabbed an M4 carbine from a fallen Marine and tossed Emma something she'd never held before. A Beretta M9 pistol. "You know how to use that." "I'm a nurse." "Not anymore." His eyes were ice-cold calm despite the blood on his face. "Right now, you're a survivor. Safety's off. Point and squeeze. We've got wounded who can't move and enemy coming through that hole. You with me?" Emma looked at the pistol in her hands, then at the 6 critical patients who'd die if they were abandoned, then at the combat medic who was already moving toward the breach she'd spent 4 years in nursing school learning to save lives, not take them. But she'd also taken an oath to protect her patients. Emma flicked off the safety and followed him toward the sound of gunfire. Drop a comment and subscribe, because what happened in the next 43 minutes would transform a field hospital nurse into something she never thought she'd become, and reveal that sometimes the person who saves your life isn't the one with the biggest gun, but the one who refuses to leave anyone behind. Lieutenant Emma Lawson was 26 years old, U.S. Army Nurse Corps, assigned to the 274th Forward Surgical Team at Forward Operating Base Phoenix in Afghanistan's Helmand Province. 5'5". Slender athletic build from pre-deployment running, honey blonde hair usually tied back in a practical ponytail, hazel eyes that patients said looked kind, but which also missed nothing when assessing injuries. From Ohio originally, daughter of a high school teacher and a firefighter who taught her that helping people was the highest calling. She joined the Army Nurse Corps right out of nursing school, driven by a combination of student loan debt and genuine desire to serve. 4 years in, she'd deployed twice, once to Iraq, once to Afghanistan. She was good at her job, calm under pressure, skilled with IVs, trauma assessment, emergency procedures. She'd seen gunshot wounds, IED injuries, burns, amputations. She'd held dying soldiers' hands and told them they'd be okay, even when she knew they wouldn't. But she'd never fired a weapon, never trained for combat, never thought she'd need to. Nurses were protected under the Geneva Conventions. They wore medical insignia. They didn't carry weapons. They were supposed to be off-limits. The Taliban didn't care about Geneva Conventions. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Doc Sullivan was 32 years old, Navy SEAL, Special Amphibious Reconnaissance Corpsman, the most elite combat medics in the U.S. military. 6'2", 195 pounds of functional muscle, dark hair and a high and tight cut, gray eyes that could assess a trauma patient in 3 seconds, hands that could start an IV in a moving vehicle or put round center mass at 50 meters with equal precision. He'd been a SEAL for 9 years, a combat medic for 7. He'd deployed 11 times, conducted operations in 14 countries, saved 43 teammates' lives, official count, and killed 27 enemy combatants, unofficial count that he didn't talk about. He carried an M4 carbine, a Sig Sauer P226 sidearm, and a medical kit that could keep someone alive through injuries that should have been fatal. He was at FOB Phoenix because his team had been conducting a village medical assessment, med cap, 20 miles out, when they'd hit an IED, 2 SEALs wounded. His team leader had ordered him to stay with the casualties, while the rest of the team pursued the attackers. That's how Doc Sullivan ended up at the field hospital when the Taliban launched their assault. He'd been checking on his wounded teammates when the first mortar hit. The blast had thrown him into a support beam, opening a gash above his left eye that bled impressively but wasn't serious. He'd ignored it and immediately started triaging wounded. Then he'd seen the army nurse, young, clearly scared but moving toward the trauma bay instead of away from it, and recognized someone who wouldn't run even when they should. He was going to need help. The kind you couldn't get from someone who panicked. Emma followed Doc Sullivan through the smoke-filled corridor, the unfamiliar weight of the pistol making her hand feel heavy. She could hear them now. Taliban fighters moving through the hospital, shouting in Pashto, firing bursts from AK-47s. "How many?" she whispered. "At least 8 breached the east wall, probably more coming." Doc moved like water, smooth and efficient, M4 carbine at his shoulder, clearing corners with professional precision. They're executing a deliberate assault. This isn't random. They knew exactly where to hit us. They reached Trauma Bay 2. 6 patients, 4 stable, 2 critical. One was Doc's SEAL teammate, Petty Officer Jackson, who'd lost his left leg below the knee in the IED blast. The other was an Afghan local police officer with a sucking chest wound. "We can't move them," Emma said, her medical training overriding her fear. "Jackson needs another unit of blood and his pressure's dropping. The ALP officer will die if we disconnect his chest tube. And they'll both die if Taliban fighters find them." Doc was already moving, grabbing medical supplies, stuffing them into a pack. "We need to hold this position until the quick reaction force arrives. How long can you keep them stable?" "As long as I have supplies and they don't get shot." "Good. Because in about 90 seconds, enemy fighters are going to come through that door, and I can't hold them off and treat patients at the same time." Emma stared at him. "You want me to?" "I want you to do whatever it takes to protect your patients. Can you do that?" She looked at Jackson, barely conscious, his young face pale with blood loss. She'd started his IV, given him morphine, told him he'd be fine. She'd looked him in the eye and promised. Emma checked the pistol's magazine like she'd seen in movies, made sure a round was chambered, and took a position behind an overturned supply cabinet that provided cover facing the door. "I can do that." Doc nodded once, then moved to Jackson's side and started another IV push of medication. "When they come through, they'll be fast and aggressive. They'll assume we're unarmed medical personnel. Use that. Wait until they're committed to the room, then put rounds center mass. Don't try for headshots. Too small a target. Aim for the chest. Shoot until they stop moving." "I'm a nurse. I save lives." "Today you're saving them by making sure the bad guys can't take them." His voice was matter of fact, not asking her to become something she wasn't, just acknowledging what the situation required. You don't have to like it, you just have to do it. 30 seconds later, 2 Taliban fighters burst through the door, AK-47s raised, expecting to find helpless wounded. Emma squeezed the trigger. The first shot went wide. Emma jerked the trigger instead of squeezing it smoothly, but the second hit the lead fighter in the chest. He stumbled back surprised. The third and fourth shots hit him again. He dropped. The second fighter was already turning toward her, his AK coming up, when Doc's M4 cracked 3 times. The fighter collapsed. Emma's ears were ringing. The pistol was hot in her hands. She was breathing too fast, almost hyperventilating. She'd just shot someone. Actually pulled the trigger and hit a human being. "Breathe." Doc's voice cut through the panic. "Slow breaths. You did good. He was going to kill everyone in this room. You stopped him. Now check your magazine. How many rounds do you have left?" Emma's hands shook as she ejected the magazine. 12, 13. 13 plus 1 in the chamber. Reload now while you have time. There's spare magazines in the dead Marine's kit by the door. He was a good Marine who'd want his equipment used to protect wounded soldiers. Get the magazines. Now. Emma forced herself to move. She crawled to where a fallen Marine, Johnson, she'd treated him yesterday for dehydration, lay near the door. She grabbed 2 spare magazines from his tactical vest, trying not to look at his face. "I've got them." "Good. Incoming." This time, 4 fighters came through the door in a coordinated rush. Emma fired until her pistol locked back empty, then fumbled the magazine change. Doc's M4 cracked steadily. When the smoke cleared, 3 fighters were down. The 4th had retreated. "Reloading," Doc called. Emma had just gotten a fresh magazine seated when she heard it, a distinctive metallic clink in the doorway. "Grenade!" Doc grabbed the nearest movable patient bed and shoved it toward the door, creating a barrier. The explosion was deafening. Shrapnel punched through the mattress, but the bed had absorbed most of the blast. Emma's ears were completely ringing now. She couldn't hear anything, but she could see another fighter coming through the smoke. She raised the pistol and fired. He went down. Doc was beside her suddenly, checking her for injuries. His lips were moving, but she couldn't hear the words. He gave her a thumbs up, then pointed to Jackson. The SEAL's blood pressure had dropped dangerously. Emma holstered the pistol and went to work. IV fluids wide open, another unit of blood. Pressure bandage check. She fell back into the familiar rhythm of nursing, her hands steady despite what she'd just done, because this she knew. This she'd trained for. Doc was at the door, pulling a dead fighter's body into the doorway as an obstacle, grabbing the man's AK-47 and spare magazines. He came back and pressed the AK into Emma's hands. "Pistol's good for close range. This gives you 30 rounds at a time, and to better stopping power. Safety here, selector here, semi-auto or full auto. Use semi, full auto wastes ammunition." Emma looked at the assault rifle, the weapon of the enemy, now in her hands. It felt wrong. It felt necessary. "How long until help arrives?" QRF was 15 minutes out when the attack started. That was 8 minutes ago. We hold for 7 more minutes. 7 minutes. 420 seconds. Emma had held compressions on a coding patient for longer than that. She could do this. The Taliban fighters adapted. They stopped rushing the door. Instead, they started a deliberate assault, suppressive fire followed by movement, trying to overwhelm the position through firepower and coordination. Doc had pulled back to a better defensive position, using hospital beds and equipment to create a makeshift barricade. Emma was beside him, the AK-47 feeling increasingly familiar in her hands. "Conserve ammunition," Doc said. "Pick your shots. They're trying to make us waste rounds." A fighter appeared in the doorway. Emma aimed, breathed, squeezed. The AK bucked against her shoulder. The fighter dropped. She'd hit him. Third person she'd shot tonight. She should feel something. Horror, guilt, revulsion. Instead, she just felt focused. There were 6 patients behind her who couldn't defend themselves. Someone had to. "Contact left!" Emma swung the rifle toward a window where a fighter was climbing through. She fired a burst. He fell back outside. "Good shooting," Doc called. Then, shit, Jackson's crashing. Emma was there in seconds. Jackson's blood pressure had bottomed out. He was going into hypovolemic shock despite the blood transfusions. He needs surgery, now. He's bleeding internally. "Can you stabilize him for 7 minutes?" "I don't know." "Yes or no, Lieutenant? Can you keep him alive?" Emma looked at the young SEAL's pale face, 23 years old. Engaged to a girl back in Virginia, she'd seen the ring around his neck on a chain. "Yes, I can keep him alive." "Then do it. I'll hold them off." For the next 5 minutes, Emma performed a brutal triage ballet, treating Jackson, checking the other patients, then grabbing the AK to help Doc suppress enemy movement, then back to Jackson. She started a vasopressor drip to maintain his blood pressure. She gave him more morphine. She talked to him, telling him about Virginia, about his fiancée, about the wedding he'd have, anything to keep him present, to keep him fighting. And when Taliban fighters tried to breach again, she shot them. The transformation happened without her noticing. 1 minute she was a nurse who happened to be holding a weapon. The next, she was a soldier who happened to have medical training. The distinction blurred in the smoke and blood and determination. Doc noticed. Between magazine changes, he looked at her with something like respect. "You're doing good, Lieutenant, really good. I'm doing what I have to. That's what makes you good." Then they heard it, the beautiful sound of American M240 machine guns opening up outside, the roar of diesel engines, the shouted commands of soldiers doing what they did best. The quick reaction force had arrived. The next 10 minutes were organized chaos. Marines from the QRF stormed the hospital, clearing rooms, securing the perimeter, establishing a casualty collection point. Army engineers began emergency repairs on the breach. Medevac helicopters landed to evacuate the critical wounded. Emma found herself in the middle of the trauma bay, still holding the AK-47, not quite ready to let it go. Around her, Marines were treating wounded, securing enemy prisoners, counting bodies. Doc appeared at her side. Someone had finally bandaged the gash on his forehead. He gently took the AK from her hands. "You can let go now. We're secure." Emma's hands were shaking. Now that the adrenaline was fading, the reality of what she'd done was setting in. "I shot. How many did I?" "You protected your patients. That's all that matters. I'm a nurse. I took an oath. First, do no harm." "You did no harm to anyone who didn't deserve it. Those men came here to execute wounded soldiers. You stopped them." He paused. "How many patients did you lose tonight?" "None. Jackson's critical, but stable. The others are all—" She stopped, realizing what he was saying. "None. I didn't lose anyone. Because you did your job, both jobs, the nursing and the fighting. You kept them alive when anyone else would have run." A Marine Corps captain approached, the QRF commander. "You're Lieutenant Lawson, the nurse who held Trauma 2? "Yes, sir. My Marines found 6 dead enemy fighters in and around your position. 7 wounded Taliban prisoners are saying an American female soldier was like a devil defending the wounded." "That was you." Emma didn't know how to answer that. Doc did. "That was her, sir. She held the position for 13 minutes under sustained assault while treating critical casualties. I recommend her for commendation." The captain studied Emma, young, covered in blood and dust, still shaking slightly but standing straight. "How many deployments, Lieutenant?" "2, sir. This is my second." "You ever fire a weapon before tonight?" "No, sir. I'm a nurse." "Not just a nurse anymore." He offered his hand. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant. You saved lives tonight. The kind you treat and the kind you stopped from taking more." The next 48 hours were a blur. Emma gave statements to investigators. She was checked by doctors. Minor cuts and bruises, nothing serious. She was told to take time to process what happened, to talk to counselors about combat stress. She kept working. There were patients who needed care. Trauma didn't stop because she'd had a bad night. Doc found her on her 3rd shift without sleep, checking vitals on a soldier who'd been wounded in a firefight. "You need to sleep. I need to make sure he's stable." "He's stable. I checked him 20 minutes ago. You're running on fumes and adrenaline, and that's how mistakes happen. Come on." He physically guided her out of the ward to a quiet corner of the medical compound. Someone had set up a coffee station. He poured 2 cups and handed her one. "Talk to me. How are you really doing?" Emma wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "I shot 6 people. Killed at least 3, maybe 4. I don't even know for sure. And I don't feel... I should feel terrible. I should be crying or falling apart. But I just feel... tired. That's normal. The emotional response comes later, once your brain decides it's safe to process. Right now, you're still in survival mode. Were you scared when you first had to... Terrified. I was 23, second deployment, first firefight as a team medic. I had a wounded SEAL bleeding out and Taliban trying to kill us both. I shot 4 enemy fighters while trying to stop his bleeding. Afterward, I threw up for 10 minutes and couldn't stop shaking. My team leader told me the same thing I'm telling you. It doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. But you're trained for combat. You're a SEAL. I'm just... a combat veteran who saved multiple lives under fire. Don't diminish what you did. Most people freeze in situations like that. You moved toward the threat. You protected people who couldn't protect themselves. That's not just anything." Emma took a long drink of coffee. "Jackson's going to make it. They flew him to Landstuhl. He'll lose the leg, but he'll live. He'll go home to Virginia and marry his fiancée. Because of you. Both the nursing and the shooting both saved his life. The Taliban fighters we wounded. I treated some of them. Put IVs in the same men I'd shot. That felt strange. Welcome to combat medicine. You treat everyone enemy, friendly, doesn't matter. Once the fighting stops, they're all patients. How do you do this? How do you switch between medic and warrior and stay sane?" Doc was quiet for a moment. You don't switch. You integrate. You're never just one thing. You're a medic with a weapon, a warrior with medical skills, both at the same time. That's what makes us effective. We can fight when we have to, but we never lose sight of why we're fighting: to protect life, not take it. He paused. But I'll tell you a secret. After 11 deployments, I still struggle with it sometimes, still have nightmares about the people I couldn't save. Still question if I did the right thing. That doubt, that's what keeps us human. The day you stop questioning is the day you should hang up the uniform. Emma leaned back against the concrete wall. What happens now? Do I go back to being a regular nurse? Pretend this didn't happen? You process it. You talk to people who understand. You accept that you're different now, not worse, not damaged, just different. You have skills most nurses will never need. You've seen things most people can't imagine. You use that experience to be better at your job, to help others who will face similar situations. The Army's probably going to want to talk to me about what happened. They already did. The Marine QRF commander put you in for a Bronze Star with Valor device. The hospital commander is recommending you for the Combat Medical Badge, which is rare for nurses, but you definitely earned it. And, he paused, my SEAL team commander asked if you'd be interested in training with our medical department, teaching combat trauma care to new corpsmen. Emma blinked. SEALs want me to train them? They want someone who's been there, who knows what it's like to treat patients under fire, to make impossible decisions in impossible situations. You've got a skill set now that's extremely valuable. The question is whether you want to use it. Before Emma could answer, alarms started blaring. Mass casualty event, convoy hit by IED, multiple critical wounded inbound. Doc was on his feet immediately. So was Emma. The exhaustion disappeared, replaced by focus. They had work to do. As they ran toward the trauma bay, Doc called back to her. Think about the training opportunity, no pressure. But you're good at this, both parts. We could use someone like you. Emma didn't have time to think about it. The helicopters were landing, wounded soldiers were being rushed in. She fell into the familiar rhythm: triage, treatment, stabilization, IV lines, bandages, blood transfusions, the ballet of combat trauma care. But now there was a difference. Now she knew that if the hospital came under attack again, if enemy fighters tried to harm her patients, she could protect them. She had the skills. She'd proven it. She was still a nurse. She'd always be a nurse first. But she was also something more now, a warrior when she needed to be, a protector, someone who'd looked at an impossible situation and refused to back down. Doc was right. She didn't switch between roles. She integrated them, both at once, always. And somehow, that felt right. 3 months later, Emma stood in front of a classroom of Navy SEAL Corpsman candidates, all of them bigger, stronger, and more experienced in combat than her. The Navy insignia on their uniforms marked them as elite warriors. The medical gear they carried marked them as healers, just like her. I'm Lieutenant Emma Lawson, U.S., Army Nurse Corps, she began. 3 months ago, I was a field hospital nurse who'd never fired a weapon. I thought my job was to treat wounded, not to fight. Then the Taliban attacked my hospital, and I learned something important. Sometimes the best way to save lives is to protect them from people who want to take them. She clicked to the first slide, a diagram of the field hospital, the breach point, the defensive position she'd held with Doc. Today, I'm going to teach you about trauma care under fire, not just the medical procedures, but the mindset, how to switch between treating and fighting, how to protect your patients when you can't get them out, how to make impossible decisions and live with them afterward. She saw respect in their eyes. These were men who understood what it took to stand your ground when every instinct said run. Men who carried weapons and medical kits and knew when to use each. You're all here because you want to be the best combat medics in the world. That means being able to start an IV while taking fire, to triage casualties while coordinating with your team, to save a life with one hand and take one with the other if that's what it takes to protect your teammates. She paused. It's not easy. It changes you. But it's also the most important job you'll ever do. Because at the end of the day, When a wounded operator is bleeding out in hostile territory, you're the difference between him going home to his family or not. Nothing matters more than that. After the class, Doc found her outside the training facility. He'd rotated back to the States for workup training with his SEAL team before their next deployment. You're a natural at this. The students love you. They respect someone who's been there. Combat experience is the best credential in this community. Still having nightmares? Sometimes less frequently now. Counseling helps. Talking to other people who've been through similar situations helps more. She paused. I talked to my command. I'm putting in for a transfer to Special Operations Medical. They need nurses with combat experience to train and deploy with SOF units. That's a big change. From conventional Army nursing to Special Operations. I'm already changed, might as well go where that experience is valued. She smiled slightly. Besides, someone told me I have a skill set that's valuable. Seems wrong not to use it. Your patients at FOB Phoenix. They're all recovered. Jackson's back in Virginia, walking on a prosthetic. He's getting married next month. He asked me to thank you again. Tell him congratulations, and tell him I was just doing my job. Both jobs, Doc corrected. That's what he wants to thank you for. The nursing and the fighting. Both. Emma looked at the SEAL candidates running drills in the distance. Young men learning to be both warriors and healers, learning to integrate both roles seamlessly. I used to think there was a line between the two, that you were either a medic or a fighter. That choosing one meant abandoning the other. I was wrong. The best combat medics aren't one or the other. They're both, always, whatever the situation requires. Welcome to Special Operations Medicine, Lieutenant. You're going to fit right in. 5 years later, Chief Warrant Officer Emma Lawson stood in a military hospital room at Walter Reed Medical Center, pinning captain's bars on a young Army nurse who'd just returned from deployment. Captain Rodriguez, you did outstanding work in Kandahar. I read your after-action report held your aid station during a 12-hour siege, treated 43 casualties, and prevented enemy from overrunning your position. That's exactly the kind of performance we need in Special Operations Medicine. The young captain looked nervous. Ma'am, I did what I had to. I'm just a nurse. Emma smiled. She remembered saying those same words once, a lifetime ago in a shot-up field hospital in Helmand Province. Captain, I'm going to tell you something I wish someone had told me earlier. You're never just anything. You're a nurse with combat experience. You've proven you can function under pressure, protect your patients, and make hard decisions that makes you exactly what we need for the Special Operations Medical Group. The hospital commander said you wanted to talk to me about a training position? More than training. We're forming a specialized team, nurses and medics with combat experience who can deploy with special operations units, forward surgery, austere environment medicine, trauma care under fire. It's dangerous work. It's incredibly challenging. And it'll push you to limits you didn't know you had. Emma paused. But it's also the most important work you'll ever do. Because when a special operations soldier is wounded in hostile territory, we're the ones who keep them alive until they can get to definitive care. We're the last line between them and death. I'm interested, ma'am. What would I need to do? First, you process what happened in Kandahar. Talk to counselors, work through it, integrate the experience. Then, if you still want this, we'll talk about advanced trauma training, tactical skills, and eventual assignment to a special operations task force. Captain Rodriguez straightened. I want this, ma'am. I've always wanted to help people. After Kandahar, I realized sometimes helping people means protecting them too. Emma recognized that look, the determination of someone who'd seen combat, who'd been tested, who'd discovered strength they didn't know they possessed. Good. Report to Fort Bragg next month. We'll start your training pipeline. She offered her hand. Welcome to Special Operations Medicine, Captain. You're going to do great things. After Rodriguez left, Doc Sullivan appeared from the hallway. He was wearing navy blues now, Lieutenant Commander bars on his collar. He'd moved up in rank and responsibility, but he was still a SEAL corpsman at heart. Another recruit for the program? She's perfect for it. Held an aid station under siege for 12 hours. Sound familiar? Reminds me of a certain Army nurse who held trauma 2 at FOB Phoenix. Whatever happened to her?" Emma laughed. She realized she was never just a nurse. She learned to integrate both parts of herself, the healer and the warrior. She stopped apologizing for being both, and she built a career teaching others to do the same. She did pretty well for herself. He paused. "Dinner tonight? There's something I want to talk to you about. Work or personal? Can it be both? We've always been good at integrating roles." Emma smiled. Over the past 5 years, she and Doc had deployed together twice, trained hundreds of combat medics, and gradually realized that the partnership that had started in a shot-up field hospital had become something deeper. They understood each other in ways that most people couldn't: the burden of taking lives to save lives, the weight of impossible decisions, the integration of warrior and healer. "Dinner sounds good, but I'm buying. Warrant officers make more than lieutenant commanders. That's not how rank works, and you know it. That's exactly how it works when I'm paying." As they walked out of Walter Reed together, Emma thought about that night at FOB Phoenix, the fear, the chaos, the moment she'd picked up a weapon and discovered she was more than she'd thought she was. She'd been terrified, she'd been uncertain, she'd been convinced she was just a nurse who didn't belong in combat. She'd been wrong about all of it. She wasn't just a nurse. She was never just anything. She was a healer who could fight when necessary, a warrior who never forgot why she carried a weapon: to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And that integration, that acceptance of both roles, both identities, had made her better at everything she did. They thought she was just the field hospital nurse, until the enemy attacked and she proved she was so much more than that. She was exactly what the situation required, when it required it, for as long as it took, and she'd never apologize for that again. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage.